Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hi there, and welcome to the show. It's April 8th, and it's a Wednesday in the year of our horror, 2020. If you come for uplifting fare, I think you better tune out right now. I got butkus, really. Is it Bupkus? Butkus. Butkus was a football player. God. So, seriously, if you want a little relief, you guys are going to have to supply it. And by the way, my city paper email is down. It's been down since last night. So if you want to talk to me, you gotta on email. You have to do it on my old show email, Cullen Show, CULLEN SHOW, Cullen Show at yahoo.com. Okay, so ideally that's where you'll send your stuff. Stuff going to the old city paper mail is supposedly forwarded to the Cullen Show site as well, but I'm just not sure it's working. So please try to use Cullen Show at yahoo.com today. And I guess that's all the housekeeping kind of stuff to deal with. Man, did that storm last night, get you up in the? When was that? I didn't look at the clock, but there was a flash of lightning and a resulting kaboom over my house that literally, I mean, I sat straight up in bed, as did the dog. It was something. I normally like thunder and lightning. I do. I like storms. And I didn't like that last night. It was scary. My heart was pounding, and I realized, I thought to myself, you're never afraid of lightning and thunder. But there was something particularly frightening about that storm, and I do see that it did some serious damage not far from here in New Kensington, and there is suspicion that it did spawn a tornado. It was scary. It was. So anyway, hope you didn't get any damage at your place. I did hear some things hitting my roof, but I haven't gone out to assess any damage. So this is me avoiding getting to the subjects at hand. Although, wait a minute, Amy is telling me that I have a caller already? All right, well, go ahead. Hello.
Hey, Lynn, it's Mike in D.C.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm okay. So I heard you talk about Joanne Rogers' interview about what Mr. Rogers would say.
Yeah.
And she said I didn't know. I wasn't listening live, or I would have called in. And I think I know what Fred Rogers would say, because he said this before about tragedies. He says, look for the helpers.
Look for the helpers. I mean, that's the classic line. Always, his mother always said to him, look for the helpers.
And there are lots of helpers.
And that's what we're doing now, too.
Gavin Newsom last night announced that California is spending $1 billion, I hope I got these numbers right, to get 200,000 masks a month. And he sent all of his, or most of his ventilators to other states and said, please send them back when ours hit.
And I know that Cuomo has said to do the same, that we've got to cooperate since we have nothing, the layer of governance over us, the federal government, is in no way doing its job to coordinate this. So governors are doing it.
But Cuomo said, please help us now and we'll help you later. Gavin Newsom said, here's our ventilators. Give them back. That's a pretty bold move to make for someone who is in charge of the public health, you know?
Well, I would imagine.
Backfire on him.
Well, I would imagine that he must feel that, I mean, he's retained enough for the current.
Can you imagine during his reelection what that's going to look like when we needed ventilators most? What did he do? Like, it's brave and the right thing to do. So there are people doing the right thing. It's just really hard to find them right now.
Yeah.
But we still have to keep looking. It's
hard to find them in the political realm, in positions of political leadership. We're not seeing. We're seeing it at the state level. We're seeing it in some states, but certainly in this administration, the federal administration. My God, it's almost as if they're working to kill us all. I cannot figure.
Well, you really want to drag this conversation down, and I'm not going to let you. Here's another good thing. The Army Corps of Engineers is doing an amazing job at building field hospitals. They invented a whole new system on how to get oxygen to beds without having a tank next to them.
Wow.
So people are really doing the right things. We just have to look for them because
that's right. There's amazing ingenuity, where they're figuring out how to take a ventilator and use it for two people. It's amazing what some people can do in moments of crisis. The proverbial people you'd want to be in a foxhole with. And God bless them all. Seriously. So you called to give us positive stuff. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
And let's see if we can keep this up for the day, right?
I cannot. I'm sorry. I got nothing here. That's goodbye.
You have callers.
Okay.
If every caller does it, the show will take off that way. But if we focus on the negative, that's what we're going to get. So look for the helpers.
Okay, and I ain't one of them today. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Sure, bye.
Bye. I do have to say, I just saw that somebody sent me a wish for a happy Passover. Tonight is the first night of, without a doubt, Jews' most favorite holiday. It's it's our Christmas in terms of popularity of holiday. Because it's communal, because it's a time when families sit around a table for 3 hours, 4 hours, and recite the same stories, ask the same ritualized kinds of questions, and it's powerful. I have never missed. I am not a very observant Jew. I have never missed celebrating Passover. Because it's communal, it's very hard on Jews this Passover. So tonight I will do a virtual Seder. That is what the dinner is called. I will do a ritual Seder with Susan's family in Chicago. A virtual ritual. And then Sunday, we're going to do it, the whole family is going to do it, because that's the day that works best for everyone in the family. And they are scattered from London to California. So we will all see each other. We did a trial run last Sunday, and it was wonderful. It was truly wonderful. But when we all said goodbye and hung up, I burst into tears. So I guess it was bittersweet is what it is. Bittersweet. Seeing the people you love, being able to talk to them, and yet not being able to touch them, to really be physically with them is rough. So to all my Jews, a happy Passover. And, just jerry-rig it however you have to. It's, what's weird is one of the questions that are asked on Passover is, why is this night different from all other nights? And the answer to that question is not the answer that people will be giving this year, right? The answer to the question on a normal Passover is that, tonight we're free, essentially. We are no longer slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt because Passover is the celebration of the Exodus of Moses and taking the Israelites out of bondage. So it's a festival of joy, of liberation. I have always said it was very powerful to me, and it is I think without a doubt, it made me the liberal I am in large part, because I remember my father, who would preside at the Seders, talking about freedom and about slavery. And there's a line that we all say where you make it very personal, where you say, I was a slave to Pharaoh in Egypt. We were slaves to Pharaoh. So it's not like, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. No, it brings it right immediately to you. And in the mid-50s, so I would have been like 7, 8 years old, I remember watching the news, because we do this at, sundown. I remember watching the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite before the Seder. And that there were those horrific pictures of Americans being set upon by police dogs and water hoses. It was the beginnings of the civil rights movement, at least in as much as we white folks in totally Whiteville, Green Bay, Wisconsin, were aware of it. It's how the little kid that was me first saw it. And I was blown away. And I do remember my dad, my wonderful father, drawing parallels to what was happening in our own country, to people, to the Americans who themselves had been enslaved not long ago, and how they were still being deprived of their freedoms. And I don't see how a Jew can go through the recitation of the Passover story and not identify then always with the enslaved, with the people who are held down, with the people who are abused and misused and must rise up. I've never understood. As you know, Jews, American Jews, do tend to, more than any other demographic other than Black Americans, vote for Democrats, because that is the party perceived to be, and in fact is, the more liberal party. Whatever. Just wanted to say how powerful the Passover, and if you ever want to see the greatest Passover bit ever done that really explains it, I was reminded of it this morning. My son, when he was young, one of his favorite shows was on, I think Nickelodeon, and it was Rugrats. And it's little teeny little kids, and it's animated. And there is an episode of Rugrats where the Passover story is told, because the grandfather is Jewish, and the grandmother too, obviously. But it is the funniest, most wonderful retelling of the story. If you can really find it on YouTube, whatever, the Rugrats Passover, it's all of 22 minutes long, and I believe it won a gazillion awards. I think it had to have won an Emmy. It also won, it was the highest rated show ever on Nickelodeon at that point, episode. And there's a reason for it. So Jews and non-Jews, I have to tell you, if you want to laugh, if you want a wonderful laugh, and a pretty good recitation of what the story is, check out the Rugrats Passover episode, okay? There. Now, my God, the sun's trying to come out. What do you think of that, Blue? That's cool. So now, I'm sorry, I have to get into some things sorry, I just have to. I have to. Yesterday we were talking about this vile acting Secretary of the Navy, who now is, as so many are in that administration, first of all, acting, and now he's the ex-acting. He has resigned after his wonderful display of leadership, screaming and swearing at the sailors who are stuck on the Theodore Roosevelt. So he is gone, replaced by another acting, probably idiot. And yesterday also I was talking about Trump and how he was using our lack of attention right now to things we would normally pay some attention to, because it's just staying alive now, right? It's a virus all the time. He is using this time to continue to settle scores, to take down people. And I specifically was talking about these inspector generals. And he's done it again. No sooner was I talking about it yesterday than, man, he flat out went and knocked out this incredibly well-respected inspector general who had been tapped to take over oversight of that $2 trillion that Congress has released, that is supposed to help Americans in this pandemic. And the fear, of course, is that because Trump is I'm sorry, there's so many possible nouns I can employ here. Trump is a con man. He is a grifter. He is not to be trusted. And that $2 million, a lot of it, if not really carefully watched out for, overseen, which is what an inspector general's job is, will end up in his pockets, his family's pockets, his friends' pockets, his donors' pockets. So he got rid of the guy already and has put in someone who won't do the job. This is just a few days after firing, of course, the intelligence community's chief watchdog, who, doing his job, set off the impeachment hearings. He has publicly attacked, in the last few days, the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services, a pretty important department right now, who has, in doing his job, documented the many shortages of critical equipment that our healthcare workers are suffering. And Trump has, in his briefings, has gone after him. So this is, as one person put it, an unfolding White House power play to essentially get rid of all the oversight that our system relies on to keep the executive branch, especially this one, from making off with our democracy and all the money that was supposed to go to us. Because this is a president who views any independence in his government, in other words, an inspector general, any independence as intolerable, as betrayal, as disloyalty, which of course is the antithesis. What he thinks our government is the antithesis of what the founders intended it. Here's a quote from a guy named Paul Rosenzweig. He was in the George W. administration, okay? He's not a Democrat. George W. administration. And he said that this latest removal of the oversight guy is an affront to independence. And he says, frankly, if the House of Representatives does not condition all further COVID aid on the restriction of the president's authority to remove these inspector generals, it will be a serious mistake. They should realize that the president is no longer operating in any semblance of good faith. And get this, from a George W. official, Trump is now more dangerous to the fabric of American democracy than the virus. Even in really conservative publications, such as the Bulwark, that's a, believe me, conservative publication, they carried a piece that said this: as hundreds of Americans lie dying and thousands more grieve their dead, President Trump remains busy acting on his grudges and consolidating power for its own sake while thumbing his nose at the rule of law. So, there you go. Now, the other piece that came out yesterday that just freaked me out, and I hate to tell you this, but we should know. I have often said, I feel very vulnerable to this virus because I have chronic asthma, and when it kicks in, it doesn't like leaving. So it takes often over a month on heavy duty, steroids like prednisone and other things to get my lungs back, which means I think that if I were to contract this, I'm a goner. But I always blamed my asthma on this city, on Pittsburgh. And I obviously, as somebody who came here and chose this to be my home, my forever home, I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else by far. It's the one thing that I think Pittsburgh staying here did to me. Because of all the small particulate pollution in the air here. We're one of the worst places in the country for it. I have little doubt that's what, at a late stage, I was like 50-something, when all of a sudden I got asthma. And I've always said, thanks, Pittsburgh. Damn. And now now it comes out. People living in places with high levels of air pollution, especially tiny, small particulate pollution, are getting this disease, COVID. When they get it, they're getting it worse than others, and they're dying from it more. So this is from analysis of the numbers throughout the United States and then looking at the air pollution levels in places. So counties with higher pollution will be the ones that will have higher numbers of hospitalizations, higher numbers of deaths. And if we had a functional federal response that was proactive, it is where many of the resources should be concentrated, according to the doctors behind this study. So if you live in a place like Pittsburgh, unfortunately, your odds of having asthma are greater. And the fact that you live here as well means that your chances of dying of this are greater as well. It's a Harvard analysis out of Harvard University. The New York Times headline is "Study Finds a Link Between Air Pollution and Virus Deaths." And I read it first last night, and I thought, great. The Pittsburgh air, which has killed a lot of people over time, is still going to kill more. And I want to say this, that the other thing the Trump administration has been doing while our heads have been turned because we're trying to stay alive, almost every few days, it seems, I see a little item tucked away somewhere that the Environmental Protection Agency has relaxed yet another rule designed to get this crap out of our air. Carbon pollution from coal-fired power plants, oh man, they're spewing that crap again. Because Obama had, of course, put in place restraints. Even when Trump's EPA lifted the coal-fired power plant pollution restraints, they acknowledged, sit down for this, his EPA acknowledged that by doing so, it would likely result in about 1,400 more premature deaths of Americans each year. They signed off on it, saying, well, we're going to kill at least like 1,400 Americans a year with this, but the coal companies are going to be happy. And after all, that's who we serve. Last week, the Trump administration said they were weakening, again, Obama's regulations on auto emissions, also spewing more crap into our air. I just want you to be aware of all of that. Hang on a minute. You saw the lines in Wisconsin. Susan and my mother wanting to see it for themselves, even though my mom had voted already by mail. They drove by my old high school, which is one of the only a few voting places that was open to voters, and they were blown away. You've seen the pictures. People standing in line. Susan said the line went around. It's a big building. The line went around the building, through a parking lot, into nearby Joanne's Park. It kept going and going and going. These are people who stood risking their lives for hours to vote. And what those pictures from Wisconsin, take it in, because this is now the biggest fight. It is a partisan fight. Republicans are going to do the same thing to us all in November unless we act now, state by state by state. It is states that control voting in this country. And and here again, we live in a state that even though we have a Democratic governor, we've got, as Wisconsin also has a Democratic governor, but they too have a Republican legislature. And unless these legislatures change the rules so that we can all vote by mail, you could likely see the same thing again in November, simply because, and I hate to say it, but most epidemiologists suspect, with a certain level of certainty, that we're going to be in another epidemic situation with this thing in November again. I mean, that it'll tail off in the summer and then come roaring back in the fall and winter. So suppressing our ability to vote is now what the Republicans care about most, and also, of course, continuing to pack every court in the land. And you saw how that worked. Both the Wisconsin Supreme Court, packed by Republicans, and the U.S. Supreme Court, packed with Republicans, both allowed the debacle in Wisconsin yesterday. And when I saw the pictures out of Milwaukee, a city that normally has 141 or something voting places, and there were 5? I mean, how is that even possible? I saw those people standing in line, and the vast majority of people I saw standing in line were black. And a lot of them did not have masks. A lot of them did. A lot of them did not. And they were standing there, trying to cast their vote. And this on the same day when we find out that it is black people in urban areas that are dying at a disproportionate, appallingly disproportionate rate. Not because somehow they are more susceptible, but because of the entrenched racism and inequalities in our country so that they don't have the resources, the medical insurance, the resources required to avoid going to their low-paying service jobs, which are now, of course, essential, that they live in smaller apartments where being able to isolate is really not possible because they're living with extended family. I bet Republicans looked at those pictures and loved it. They saw these long lines of black people trying to vote. And they're figuring, well, they're dying at a really disproportionate rate. So let's see. I wonder how many people in that line in another month we can X off. We killed them. And if you think they're not thinking that, then you're even more naive than I. Okay, we have another caller. Caller, go ahead, please.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
This is already happening in Pennsylvania. As you know, we're trying to convince everybody to do mail-in ballots, but the state legislature, and it was signed by our governor because of what, I'm not exactly sure. We have to have all of our precincts open at our primary election. And we have a precinct system, which means that every ballot is different in every precinct. So we can't combine our precincts.
Jesus.
And poll workers don't want to work. People don't want to go to the polls. But there are a lot of people who don't watch the news. They don't know that the date has changed or that they can even vote by mail. A lot of people don't change their addresses when they move from one place to another. Mm-hmm. So even if we had all the correct addresses for every voter and we sent out ballots to every voter, there would still be a lot of voters that wouldn't be voting.
Well, now is a time. I'm just going to insert here that I did already request a ballot for the primary. I've never done that before, but I did, and I want to tell you it's relatively easy. You got to jump through a few hoops here and there, but guys do that now for the primary, and then we'll make sure that people know to do it again. This is, to get this guy out, this is the most consequential election of our lifetime, I think, of our nation's history. We have got to rid ourselves of this Republican death grip we are in. So you can go to... You can go, here's where I went. I went to AlleghenyVotes.com, okay?
Yeah.
AlleghenyVotes.com. You can also go to VotesPA.com. Both work. I don't know. I didn't do the VotesPA.com, but I'm assuming it works as well, too.
It does.
And you have to apply by, at least now, by the 21st of this month.
26th of May. They have to receive it by the 26th of May.
But I think you have to apply by the 21st of this month, don't you?
Yeah.
So you got to do this today. I don't have my dates
in front of me, so I don't.
Okay, but we'll clarify that. But yeah, you gotta, because this is the new game plan. Listen, Trump used to figure he was going to win re-election because he was going to run on the strong economy, and he was also going to run against the socialists of, the Democrats. Right. Well, I'm afraid both those strategies are now looking really wobbly. since it was the president himself who forced GM and 3M to change what they were manufacturing. As pure socialism there. All the Republicans who voted, for, everyone's a socialist in a pandemic, so they've now gone over. And also, of course, the economy is still going to be reeling. So he's got nothing. He also has his outrageous, ineptitude showing every day. So the only way he wins now, for sure, is keeping us from voting.
Well, we also have to help the people who don't have access to computers, who don't really know what's going on, and there are tons and tons and tons of them, and the elderly who, I don't know how to use a computer, I don't own a computer, and, even get them to call the office, and the office will send them out a mail-in ballot request.
This is where if the Democratic Party is able to do anything, this is where now they have got to focus. Voter turnout and getting people ballots. This is what that whole apparatus has to do. Yeah. More than anything else. Oh, God.
We are going to have people. I don't know how we're going to staff the polls. I don't know who's going to come to the polls. And there are some people who just say, I've always gone to the polls, I'm going to the polls, I don't care what the virus is doing. Okay, fine.
Well, okay.
But
that's assuming that there'll be people, poll workers, who are overwhelmingly older people.
Right. And a lot of them have dropped out already.
Yeah. No, I don't blame them.
I don't blame them.
You sign up to be a poll worker. You don't sign up to, give your life in the effort. Although a lot of those folks standing in line in Wisconsin yesterday said, earlier generations risked their lives and gave their lives so that I would have the right to vote. The least I can do is risk mine in this way to vote. And, it makes you just want to weep. So thank you very much for your call. And what you have brought up is, I think, the major issue now of getting Trump out of office. It's the biggest fight we have.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
Thank you. I so appreciate the call. Thank you. Hey, I do also have one more happy thing, and then we're going to be joined by a guy who works at Pittsburgh City Paper, and his work is featured prominently in the issue that came out today. He is a photographer, and he has put together a display of Pittsburgh in the pandemic. I mean, just the emptiness. There's a lot of, photographers now cataloging the strangeness of empty streets and empty highways. So I'm going to talk to him in a little bit. I do want to mention something that happened to me the other day that made me awfully happy. I was walking the dog, and in a neighborhood, we sort of wandered into a neighborhood I don't normally go to, and I saw a sign, a hand-lettered sign stuck on a bush in front of someone's house and next to the sidewalk. And there were also things hanging next to the sign. And I came up upon it, and the sign said something to the effect of, we made these for you. If you need one, please take one. And it was homemade masks just hanging from the bush in front of the house. And I thought, man, it just gladdened my heart. It really did. And I did take one because you really should have, my understanding is, per person, about 3 per person, so that they can be, you wear one and then you don't wear it a second time, you wash it. And so you always have to have another to, and, granted, it probably doesn't do much, but it does something. And even if it lessens the odds of you contracting the virus by, let's say, 2%, that's something. And or even if you don't maybe know you have the virus because you're one of those asymptomatic people, it would protect other people. So I know the mask stuff is, a lot of people saying, it doesn't do a thing, the little, masks that people are making. It does something. And it also reminds you that these are not ordinary times. So I think that's pretty important. I also want to say that in regard to what the Supreme Court did yesterday with Wisconsin, do you know they did that while they stayed in their own little houses, right? Oh, excuse me, their Supreme Court justices, in their big houses. They did that sitting in their big houses, protecting themselves. And while sitting there by themselves, protecting themselves, the 5 Republicans on that court decided that they would not allow Wisconsin voters the same ability to maintain their safety and security. It's unbelievable. They were very careful to make accommodations for their own safety. As for all those poor slobs in Wisconsin, the 5 Republican-appointed justices said, essentially, "Ha! Fuck you." All right. I'm done with that. Jared, are you there?
I am here.
Good. This is Jared. Now, do you pronounce it Wickerham, or like an English person would, or Wickerham?
Wickerham. Yep, you got it right the second time.
Okay. Wickerham. Okay. Jared Wickerham is the guy with the camera. And you've been the guy with the camera for an awful long time, huh?
Yeah, I've been at Pittsburgh City Paper for, I guess it's almost 2 years now.
Yeah, but you've been in other places before.
I have, yeah. I worked for Getty Images in Boston for a few years, and outside of that, just kind of freelanced for various clients. So
when you were at Getty, did that coincide with the Boston Marathon bombing?
It did, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And I was employed by their sport division at the time. Getty essentially has sport, news, and entertainment. So their staff photographers work for specifically that group. But obviously during that time, I was pulled from sport and put on news for about 2 weeks. So
yeah.
That was quite a wild time. I even saw a photo this morning of someone and a friend of mine in Boston had photographed the streets around Fenway Park, and it just it was a little creepy because it very much reminded me of when we were in lockdown and walking around Boston and driving around Boston. There wasn't a single car, a single person, and as they essentially hunted for the Sarnoff brothers.
Geez, we forget that, yes, Boston was put on a lockdown while they searched for those guys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have covered calamity before. You covered, well, right, it would have been pretty much, you'd been in Pittsburgh for all of a year or so, and Tree of Life. happened.
Right. Yeah. And, even when I lived in Boston, we had the Sandy Hook school shooting, which was not far, which I was asked to go cover as well. And, that was,
oh man,
it's exponentially, it feels like getting worse every year. I feel like there's, it used to be that it was just those things happening in big cities. And now that we're so connected, it's it can happen anywhere. And, it certainly seems like, some of these things are happening at a higher frequency than they ever have. So, yeah.
Well, it's weird. I live near Tree of Life, and I was walking by it a few days ago, and I thought, wow, that was just like a year. Was it like a year ago? A year and a half now, maybe a year and a half ago. And I thought that was the most horrific thing that could have happened in my community, in my life. And as I walked by a few days ago, I'm walking by empty streets. That's a pretty busy intersection normally. No a car here, a car there. And I thought, wow, we are living in these extraordinary times, which does require, of course, folks in your profession to catalog it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, I think it's hard to, sometimes you got to kind of keep perspective and in the moment, I think, everyone kind of, needs to and wants to hunker down, but at the same time, you have to really force yourself to think about it and realize that years from now, we're going to want a document of this time and how can you best record history from your point of view? What's going to be important years down the road?
Exactly. Okay. I saw some of your photos from the Strip District. Now, when you think of a place that is, just sort of like roiling with humanity, cheek to jowl and, those sidewalks packed and the road you can't even see because the cars are bumper to bumper, and there's nobody there. It's eerie in a way.
It is. Yeah. I mean, when I have friends and family come into town and they say they want to, have breakfast at Pamela's in the Strip, as much as I love my hotcakes, I don't want to fight traffic, people. And,
right.
So, I saw a woman who was walking her dog and she said, Leroy loves these walks. He loves these walks now. There's no one to fight with on the sidewalk. And, but yeah, it's quite sad. And there's a lot of staples in Pittsburgh that, unfortunately, won't survive after all of this. So that's you got to think of both sides. Like, sure, there's certainly some positives that come out of all this, but there's going to be a lot of people hurting too. So,
well, I think the positives are truly dwarfed. So the issue, there's a new issue of City Paper out. Guys, look for it, pick it up. And your work again is prominent. What did you do this week?
So the last couple of weeks, I've been compiling a number of. We called it Portraits of the Pandemic. We found a number of people willing to be photographed who are essential workers in Pittsburgh. I tried to get as many different professions from as many different types of people and neighborhoods and communities. So on the cover, we're featuring Sydney Davis, who's a bus driver for Port Authority, who just happens to also be a former photojournalist. He was a photojournalist for the Trib for many years.
For heaven's sakes. Oh, wow.
And, we have a nurse. She works at AGH, a postal worker from Stanton Heights. We have an owner of an auto repair shop in the South Side. a rabbi, a restaurant crew, even people like Rick Dayton, the morning news anchor at KDKA, who told me some wild stories about how he's adjusted in this time. I mean, he's been, a couple weeks filming from his house and doing, just like we are doing phone interviews, doing Skype interviews and editing that video himself and putting it together and essentially making it look like he's in the studio.
Yeah, but in a case like that, so was he uncomfortable having you, then you photographed him in his home, so was he uncomfortable having you come into his home?
So we actually did it outside of the KDK studios. He was home for a couple of weeks, I believe, and then he was in the studio for a couple of weeks. But they're they only let in a very limited number of people into the studios. It's a CBS rule, and so he said, I think it's just two of them. I think it's just a tech, somebody running camera, and him, and they don't overlap. He said someone from news will come in, but they'll stand clear on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
There's none of that. I'm sure, as we all do, we miss that community. Being at the office at City Paper, and in Rick's case, being around all of your coworkers and.
It's true. It's really, man. Hey, I think, I was told that you were you had gone off because you still do a lot of sports stuff. You had gone off to California to photograph this tennis tournament, major tennis tournament. And you know what? I was, I think, in the same place as you were, because on March 31st, I flew out to Palm Springs. And when I got off the plane, there were a lot of people around, and some people had tennis rackets. And I remember my friend said, I think there's a big tournament that's going to happen here. Is that where you were, at Indian Wells?
Yes, yeah. There was a tournament right before. So you probably meant February 31st. There was a small tournament called the Oracle Challenger Series for a week that ended on the Sunday the 1st, I believe. And then the BNP Paribas Open, which is the big one. I run a photo team out there of 4 photographers, 2 photo editors. We have writers and social media and PR and the whole gamut. And so we finished the Oracle Challenger Series tournament on Sunday around 2:30, and at about 6:00, everybody from my team had landed. Some of them came in from Wyoming and, New York, New Jersey. We had people come in from Canada. Luckily, we stopped the one guy who was coming in from Australia before he got his flight.
Can you imagine going all that way and then being told, never mind, turn around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them landed to that news of the BNP being canceled. I think we were one of the first sporting events in North America
that got canceled. Yeah.
And I think at the time we all thought, this might be a little bit of an overreaction. It felt worse and worse every day. Absolutely. But even on March 1st, we thought maybe this is, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just taking the safe route. And obviously, as the days went on, it became clear they made the right decision.
Exactly.
It would have been canceled a day or two later anyways, but
you're absolutely
escalated so quickly.
You're right. And I was there for a week and got out on March 7th, but I was nervous. I mean, getting on a plane and all that, right? And I've been pretty much holed up since. But your job requires you to be out there, and I hope you're taking care.
I am. Yep. Lisa provided us all with masks, and I have gloves and disinfecting wices, and all the
all the
stuff. Keeping the distance, and washing, doing a lot of laundry. So
Yeah. Well, Jared Wickerham, very nice talking to you. You be safe, keep up the good work, and thank you so much, because you're out there too. Okay. Thank you.
It.
Bye. Bye. There's somebody who's, we're writing history, and he's doing the history here in Pittsburgh, as are so many others as well. I want to catch up on some of the emails that have come in. Let's see. This is from Sean King. Is this something? Okay, wait. African Americans represent this is from Milton. African Americans represent just 32% of the population of Louisiana, but over 70% of the deaths there. Wow. Black folk represent just 29% of the population in Chicago, but over 70% of the deaths in Chicago. In Michigan, African Americans represent just 14% of the population, but 40% of the deaths there. Same kind of data holding true in Philly. I don't know about here in Pittsburgh. Milwaukee, I believe the disparity is going to obviously show the same. Oh, wait, you're saying in Milwaukee it is as bad as any. Oh, of course. African Americans represent just 26% of the population. So they represent a quarter of the Milwaukee population, but over 81% of the coronavirus deaths. And yet those black people were standing in line yesterday. They were standing in line to vote. And those fucking Republicans know damn well they ain't voting Republican. But this is Sean King writing, and he says, as this data becomes mainstream, I believe what is going to happen is that we are going to see conservative white Americans care less and less about the pandemic. Oh, yeah, it's killing black people. Well, something we don't care about. Sean King also says before this demographic data was out, we saw some states with Republican governors, like Ohio and Georgia, reschedule their primaries. But now that we see precisely who is paying the biggest price, I sincerely think, he says, we're going to see conservative white Americans check out emotionally. Oh, God. God. Chuck writes, when I applied online for my mail-in ballot for the primary, they also asked me if I wanted a mail-in ballot in the fall, and I indicated yes. I didn't see that question. Huh. Okay, well, that's good to know. That is how they should do it. Lou tells us the last day to register to vote is May 18th. The last day to apply for an absentee ballot is May 26th. Okay, so you got a lot more time than I thought. Thank you for that. The primary election will be June 2nd. Geez, I wouldn't wait till May 26th, because what happened to a lot of people in Wisconsin is they applied in a timely fashion, but toward the end of the application time, and they never received a ballot. A lot of them never received their ballot. God almighty. Okay, and Barbara tells me that a Rugrats Passover is the 23rd episode of the third season. Okay, so if you go to where is it? Season 3, episode 23. Originally aired in 1995. Oh man, I remember watching it and thinking it was the most hysterical thing I'd ever seen. So check it out. Third season, 23rd episode. It's called A Rugrats Passover. Thank you for that. Debbie writes, I have a plumber in my house now. Pipes are leaking. They are old. I can't wait for things to get back to normal, so we're staying away from each other. Keeping 3 dogs quiet, going to be a long day. I also got a mail-in ballot. Wonder where I can get a bunch to fill out, like Trump said. Oh, Trump saying, yeah, people are going to get a bunch of... Meanwhile, he voted absentee. I was a Florida resident. He voted mail-in. And a reporter asked him, but you voted mail-in? And he said, well, yeah, because I could. God, please help us. Anyway, here is your COVID update from the Allegheny County Health Department. They drop this thing about 11 every day. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is much bigger than it was yesterday. And it's an undercount because we don't have access to the kind of testing we should have. They're saying 720 positive cases. I'm sure you could add 1,000 or 2 to that. 113 hospitalizations and 10 deaths now. That age group of 25 to 49 continue to outpace all the others in terms of positive cases. And for some reason, more females than males around here, even though every other place they're saying quite the opposite. I don't know. What is it with women here? I guess because we're old. We are old. Yeah, I also want to note the passing of the great John Prine. And if you have never bothered to listen to John Prine, oh my God, treat yourself. He was amazing. I want to see some his songs are, well, they're Dylan-esque in a way, Bob Dylan-esque, in that they tell stories of regular people, and they are they're just brilliant. I mean, I think maybe the one most people know that maybe got covered the most is Hello in There, Hello, I Just Called to Let You Know, right? That one, which is about loneliness and older people. There's just, anyway, I can't find it now. God damn it. Oh yeah, here it is. And just let me check. He died, by the way, of coronavirus. Okay, he was 73. Oh, for Christ's sake! Now I've lost it again. I'm a subscriber. Let me see it. God damn it. They're not letting me. Okay, I don't know how to sign in right now. We have a caller. I'm sorry, I forgot about you callers for a second. Those that hung up, call back. I'll keep going here for a while. Hello, caller, are you there? Hello? Anyone there? Hello? I guess they hung up too. I'm sorry. That's what happens when I go on. And I guess, well, if we don't have callers, although let me try to find that John Prine thing in another way. Okay. Raspy-voiced Heartland troubadour who wrote and performed songs about faded hopes, failing marriages, flies in the kitchen. Oh, and the desperation of people just trying to get by. He was, as one of his songs put it, the bard of broken hearts and dirty windows. He was a mail carrier, and he would write a lot of his songs on his route. He'd just get in his head. And, I mean, his fans are, take in like every other great musician. One who called him the closest thing I could imagine to ever being around Mark Twain. Yeah. So, Hello in There and Paradise is another one of his great songs, which is autobiographical, and it's a lament about how his family's Kentucky town where he grew up was literally demolished to make way for a strip mine. One of his first glowing reviews came from not a music critic, but Roger Ebert, the famous film critic. And Ebert had seen him at a Chicago watering hole and just wrote this rave. Chris Christopherson went to hear him at the same Chicago club, and then listened to about 7 songs, and then Christopherson asked him to play them all again. He couldn't believe what he just heard. Christopherson said he was unlike anybody I'd ever seen. Such a young kid, and yet he's writing songs like Hello in There. He was singing some of the best songs I've ever heard. And they're still the best songs I've ever heard. And in Hello in There, it's an old man reflecting on his life and all his sorrows. And one line is, "We lost Davy in the Korean War, and I still don't know what for. It don't matter anymore." Old people just grow lonesome, waiting for someone to say, "Hello in there. Hello." Got a few other lines from other ones I'll share with you. He did one on Dear Abby. Dear Abby, my fountain pen leaks. My wife hollers at me and my kids are all freaks. Every side I get up on is the wrong side of bed. If it weren't so expensive, I'd wish I were dead. Signed, Unhappy. One of the poet laureates of the U.S., Ted Kooser, said he is a truly original writer, unequaled, and a genuine poet. That's from the poet laureate of the American people. He did a better job of holding up the mirror of art to the 60s and 70s than any of our official literary poets. And none of our poets wrote anything better about Vietnam than Prine's Sam Stone, which is a chilling ballad about a wounded veteran coming home. One of the lines is, with a purple heart and a monkey on his back. And the refrain is, there's a hole. His child sees him and says, there's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes, because he's addicted to morphine to ease his pain. Anyway, gotta say, If you can treat yourself today, why don't you listen to some of John Prine's greats? Because God knows there's a ton of them, and that'd be a way. Actually, this is from the Paradise, the one about his hometown being plowed under. Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where Paradise lay? Well, I'm sorry, my son, but you're too late in asking. Mr. Peabody's coal train has hauled it away. Oh, man. Okay. Well, guys. Amy, is that caller still there? I'm sorry, because then I went on again. Caller, if you're there, last call. All right. You need more staying power. I'm going to have to hand out Viagra to all of you. All right, guys, that's it. Again, a happy Passover to my Jewish listeners. And be well. Hang in there. Listen to John Prine and watch Rugrats Season 3, Episode 23. Was that it? Rugrats Passover. It's a riot. Okay? I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.